أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu and welcome to our class today. I hope and pray that everyone is doing very well. Okay, so now let's go to looking at our rule in focus for today's class. As I mentioned, we're continuing with the rules of Waqf, and today we are looking at rules number 9, 10, and 11. So rule number 9, okay, so let's start from here. Rule number 9 is that if you see that the last letter of the word that you'd like to take a pause at has a fathatain on top of it. Okay, so as you can see, let me grab this icon. Okay, so if you see that there's a fathatain, as you can see over here, like this, followed by a blank alif, okay, then when you want to take a pause after this, what will happen is that the fatha with the alif will be pronounced in place of the tanween. So what will happen is that one of the stroke of the fathatain will be removed from our pronunciation, and we will be left with a fatha followed by an alif mad like this. Okay, so you can see the difference. So in pronunciation, if we were to read this word in continuation without pausing, without stopping, we would recite this as abwaban. We would be reciting it with the tanween because there's a fathatain. Abwaban. Now, if you want to take a pause, as I mentioned, what will happen is this one stroke of the fatha will be dropped, okay, and we'll be left with the single fatha, simple fatha, followed by an alif mad. Okay, it becomes an alif mad because, of course, the letter before carries a fatha. So we'll now recite this as abwaba. Okay, because of the alif mad, we are now prolonging our sound for 2 counts. Abwaba. Okay, so that is rule number 9. Let's have a look at rule number 10. Now, rule number 10 says that if the last letter of the word that you like to take a pause at, the last mutaharrik letter, let's say this is over here, it's the ayn. If that carries a vertical fatha and that is followed by a blank ya, then there will be no change in our pronunciation if you want to take a pause after this word. Okay, so in this scenario, in this case, in this example, there will be no change in pronunciation when we want to take a pause. So this in continuation will be read as yes, we are going to pronouncing the vertical fatha. Yes, and as I mentioned, when we want to take a pause at this word, there will be no change. So we will still read it as yes. So over here, it's written slightly different because we can see that it's written with an alif mad over here, but it's just a different way of writing it, but it's the same pronunciation. Okay, in continuation, this is yes, and if we're pausing, it's still yes, okay. Now let's have a look at rule number 11. Rule number 11, we can see over here, this is the word, the example that we're looking at, and you can see that the last letter is a ya and it carries a vertical kasra. Okay, it carries a vertical kasra. Now, in this example over here, there will be no change in pronunciation. Okay, so just like rule number 10, for rule number 11 as well, there will be no change in pronunciation. So in continuation, this is read as yuhyi, yuhyi. And if we're taking a pause, it will still be read as yuhyi. The vertical kasra will remain there and our pronunciation will be the same, and we will still stretch for 2 counts because of the vertical kasra. Yuhyi. Okay, so those are the 3 examples, 3 rules of waqf that we are looking at. today. Okay, now I'm just going to show you a few examples of rules number 9, 10, and 11 being shown in the Holy Quran, and examples of it in the Holy Quran. Okay, now for rule number 9, we'll take you to Surah Al-Adiyat. Okay, so this is the surah, and I believe we've covered this previously in class as well, but of course it was before we started looking at the rules of Waqf, so now we can really see with a new insight as to why it is that we take a pause and stop in a particular way, and why it is that we sound it in that particular way. Okay, so over here we can see in Surah Al-Adiyat, the second verse, it ends with a letter, the letter ha with the fathatain on top of it, followed by this blank alif. Okay, now rule number 9 says that when this happens, then one of the strokes of fatha is dropped. Okay, one of the strokes of fatha is dropped, and we are left with the letter with the fatha followed by the alif mad. Okay, so we would recite this as ضبها ضبها. We are going to stretch for 2 counts at the end, because we are going to be left with a fatha on the ha and an alif mad straight after it. Over here as well, we can see that we have, again, letter ha with a fathatain followed by a blank alif. So when we take a pause, following rule number 9, we drop one of the fathas. We're left with a single fatha with a alif mad straight after it. قَدْحَا قَدْحَا. Okay, so those were just a few examples from Surah Al-Adiyat, but as you can see, I've highlighted several more, and inshallah in your breakout room, your teacher will go through this with you in a bit more detail. Okay, and this is an example of rule number 10. Okay, so you can see over here, this is Surah Al-Alaq. Okay, and you can see over here, for example, okay, let's have a look at this one, okay, where my hand is. You can see that we have, okay, actually, I think this would be a better example to look at. Okay, so just ignore this. Okay, this one over here, we can see last letter, the noon, the last mutaharrik letter before the end of the verse is noon with a vertical fatha followed by a blank ya. Okay, now rule number 9 says that when this happens, then there will be no change in our pronunciation. So this will be still pronounced as taghna, taghna. Okay, so you can see that there's no change in pronunciation when you see a letter with a vertical fatha followed by a blank ya like this. Okay, and there's more examples of this in Surah Al-Alaq. You can see that there are several places where this rule is being applied, rule number 10. So that's something we can look at as well. Okay, and inshallah, your teacher will go through this with you in the breakout room. Okay. And for rule number 11 over here, you can see that we looked at this in lesson number 21, the word yuhyi, and you can see that I've highlighted this for you over here. This is from Surah Yunus. Okay, and you can see that, for example, if you want to take a pause over here, then there will be no change in our pronunciation. This will still be read as yuhyi, and then you would carry on. Okay, so those were just a few examples of rule number 9, 10, and 11 from the Holy Quran. And there's several more that you might want to look at as well yourself to do some self-study.